So this is a panel with statewide publicly funded programs and effective legislation. We have Helga Schimkat. Helga is a lawyer and a writer with 26 years of experience in the public and private sectors. Her work has included lobbying at the New Mexico Legislature on behalf of nonprofit clients, serving as the House Majority Office Chief of Staff, and representing nonprofit clients as well as individuals. Helga has lived in Santa Fe for 24 years and was born and raised in New York. She has a BA from Yale and a JD from Columbia. Teresa Brunner has been involved with the Federation of Humane Organizations of West Virginia since 1995. She maintains 2 animal welfare websites and various social media pages. She edits the FOHO West Virginia Animal Law Book, which is in its 2020 edition and is used by law enforcement and animal control in West Virginia. A founding board member of the Taylor County Humane Society, she's a former teacher and educational technology sales consultant. Teresa initiated FOHO West Virginia's highly successful state animal conferences, along with FOHO West Virginia. Teresa fights to maintain strong animal cruelty laws in the state and addresses other animal advocacy issues, with the spotlight in West Virginia presently on ending greyhound racing in the state. Teresa knows that we must control animal population in West Virginia through increased spay-neuter efforts. Teresa's, better known as Sis, now lives in Elkins, West Virginia with her husband Dave and 2 rescue dogs. Teresa feels that one of her greatest achievements is her efforts with FOHO West Virginia in the passage of the West Virginia Spay-Neuter Assistance Funding Bill in 2017. Teresa sits on the West Virginia Department of Agriculture Animal Advisory Committee, which oversees the grant funding that allowed nearly 9,000 West Virginia dogs and cats to be altered in the program's first year. Teresa believes that we can make a difference for animal welfare in West Virginia by being informed and proactive locally and at the state level. She knows that there are many animal people around the state, and she hopes they will recognize how powerful their united effort can be in speaking for those who have no choice. Sherry Gustafson. Sherry is the program coordinator for the Mass Animal Fund, a program of the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. Sherry started working for the fund in 2014 as the spay-neuter community liaison. Before joining the MDAR team, Sherry worked in animal welfare for 10 years as a veterinary technician, volunteer coordinator, and animal care, education, and adoption specialist. Sherry has also volunteered as a tech for local spay-neuter clinics and has deployed to help animals in emergency situations.
Right. So thank you for attending today's presentation. We're going to give you an overview of publicly funded spay-neuter programs and direct you to some resources so you can find out a lot more about it. The topic is huge. We could do a whole day on these different programs. So the resources will be very helpful if it's something you're interested in pursuing further. And we're focusing on programs at the state level. Yesterday, you heard Frank talk about that there are state publicly funded programs and county, local, etc. We're focusing only on the state level ones at this point. We're going to talk quite a bit about the pet food fee. The first 2/3 of what we present will be on that. I'll give you an overview, and then Teresa will speak in more detail about how they enacted the pet food fee in West Virginia. And she's a hero for getting that passed there. Just did an awesome job. And Sherry's going to talk about Massachusetts, where they have an income tax checkoff and have looked into some other options along the way. We'll do questions at the end. My background as a lawyer is I have focused mostly on nonprofit advocacy work, environmental and animal, and have been involved in the New Mexico legislative session ever since 1999 was my first year. And I've worked in a whole bunch of different capacities, lobbying, as staff for the session and so forth. When Maddie's Funds was first announced back in like 98, 99, I was hired by Animal Protection to try to put together a coalition for that in New Mexico. And the more we learned, the more it wasn't possible for us at that time. But for that, and right after that, I wound up doing a statewide analysis on what we need in terms of spay-neuter to really overcome the overpopulation problem. And one of the big key facts that I've always believed in is that you need to do a lot of spay-neuter consistently in order to really make a dent. Because if you do an isolated program and then have no more spay-neuter for a while, everybody who isn't spayed and neutered is going to be reproducing in the meantime and getting you back to levels you were. So that's one of the reasons publicly funded spay neuter programs can be very helpful. It's more secure and can be long-term than going grant by grant. So I've done the statewide analysis a few times, and in 2011, our state legislature passed a memorial requesting that a state entity called the Animal Sheltering Board do a study for spay neuter and possible funding mechanisms in the state. And I was hired by the board to do that analysis. And I researched all the different kinds of statewide mechanisms and private grants as well as delivery methods for spay neuter, you know, transport vans versus MASH clinics, and put together what we called a feasibility study. And the recommendation that I came up with at that time was that the pet food fee was the best option for us to pursue. And it's been 10 years since that study came out, or 11 years. And we did finally in New Mexico pass that and have it signed by the governor in 2020, one of the few highlights of 2020. Unfortunately, now there's 2 lawsuits against it. So, you know, there's a little bit more hassle involved. But so that's my background. And the most recent thing was I worked for United Spay Alliance in 2019, starting in 2018, on some pet food funding outreach, and it resulted in us producing what we called a guide to enacting state legislation for sustainable spay neuter funding. And it's about 40 pages, 50 pages, talking about these different mechanisms and going step by step through the process of enacting legislation, because pretty much all of these things need legislation. And so it goes through committing to it, to the effort, how to set up your organizational structure, the actual legislative process, working with the governor, working with the state agencies. And that is where we have a couple of pages, 3 or 4, of links to so many resources. Everything you need will be there. I mean, new ones will come along, but that's all of West Virginia's information is on there. Maryland, the 4 states that have the pet food fee: West Virginia, Maryland, Maine, and New Mexico. We're in the process of revising it because it was written before New Mexico's passed, and so I'm still working on that. And hope to have it done sometime soon, and I'm thinking that I will shoot for March 15th, since you know you'll be getting the recordings that day. That might be a good way to keep in mind, to check back on the United Spay Alliance website for the guide. So if you have questions after today, just hang on until that time and you'll be able to find a lot of information. There are 2 resources on the site now that could be helpful to you. One is basically a version of the chart Frank presented yesterday with all the state programs throughout the country. His is a year and a half or so more current, but when I scanned it yesterday quickly, there may be a couple that I had on there that we want to merge. And I don't know if United Spay Alliance and Frank want to maybe post that on their site instead, since it'll be more current. So that it's a resource to find other programs. The other thing on there, I had done a spreadsheet that included human population of each state in the country, poverty rate, political composition, where the euthanasia rates in the states fall according to Best Friends categorization of, you know, high, medium, low. So the idea of that chart is to see where your state falls in comparison to other states, so that if you see like, hey, New Mexico passed it, what do they look like compared to us? How does West Virginia look compared to us? And part of that can also be helpful in terms of considering the different types of funding. You heard some of the mechanisms already yesterday. There's at the state level, you can have rabies vaccination differentials, so that you pay more for a vaccine if your animal is not spayed or neutered, and that would go into a fund. There's dog and cat licensing fee differentials. That may depend on whether it's a viable option for you, may depend a lot on whether that program is run at the state level or the local level. If it's local, it would be a very hard task to get that done in each single locality in the state if you wanted to all have it, meld together. There's nothing wrong with trying for it in your locality if you want to just, work on a local or county program. But the chart can help with some of the information, and I have legislative dates in there and what type of legislature and so forth. So another place to get you started if you're not familiar with looking at these factors. And you can also use information in there if you need to work on a study. So one of the things that, wow, I'm down to 2 minutes, I'm timing myself. For the state of New Mexico, I did the feasibility study, as I said, and that's one of the points that I want to emphasize, that starting with a study is a really great way to assess what the situation is in your state and be able to have documentary evidence when you talk to legislators to say, we studied it, here are actual numbers and dollar amounts you put in there. And it's quite a bit of work. And I should say the whole legislative process is a lot of work. This is not a, set aside 20 hours a week for 2 months and you're done. It's a multi-year, long-term approach. Easier in some states than others. Politics is a factor, but the payoff can be great. The New Mexico fee will generate just over $1 million per year for spay-neuter funding. In 3 years, it ramps up the cost of it over the 3 years. So it's intense to start, but the benefit is great. You do have to stay on top of it once it's passed. Regulations have to be passed by the proper state agency, and then there can be attempts in the future to go at the bill and change it in a way that's not beneficial. If the bill has a sunset clause, meaning that it will expire in 10 years, that you have to be on top of it then to make sure that it gets renewed and your funding source doesn't dry off. And the way to do that is to document, show your statistics, how well the money was used, what the impact is, how it is helping the communities. I'll just say briefly that the way the pet food fee works, in short, it will vary from state to state, maybe depending on how your laws are set up. But the fee is a fee that pet food manufacturers pay to register each label of their food in the state. Now, in some states, that might go by tonnage sold and a few different things. But let's take, if you just look at wellness, which is what I feed some of my cats. They have, let's say, canned, they probably have kibble, they have dog, they have cat. So out of cat cans, there's probably 12 flavors, if not more. Each of those cat canned flavors is a label. Each type of kibble, each flavor, each species is a label. So they add up each of those labels, the label in general, not the actual number of cans sold within that label. And so for each label, they will be paying a $100 fee, and that adds up to this just over $1 million. Some states don't have their laws set up for, because all commercial pet food or commercial animal feed is subject to state regulation and licensing. And if the system is set up differently, you have to tweak that label process probably somewhat, but it's the same general idea. And the manufacturer can pass the cost back to consumers, and the way we figured it, it's like $2 per household per year. It's quite minimal, but they don't have to, it's up to them. So far, as my understanding from people who've made the calls around the states, is that there has been no retailer who has lost business in the states where they do have the fee because food has gone up so much or something. It hasn't gone up in a way that has impacted their businesses at all. I will just turn it over to Teresa at this point. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Perfect. So just to give you some information about Mass Animal Fund, so our program is primarily funded, or almost entirely funded, by voluntary donations on the tax checkoff in Massachusetts. So to give you some background, basically the fund took about 10 years of work, legislative work, to get going. So we were created back in 2012 from the Massachusetts Acts of 2012. It created the Homeless Animal Prevention and Care Trust in Mass, and that's later known as the Mass Animal Fund. Basically, through that trust fund, we had a governor-appointed advisory committee that was formed, and they determined the best way for us to prevent animal homelessness in Massachusetts was through two avenues. One was to offset the cost of spay and neutering to animals in need across Massachusetts, and the other was to train animal control officers across the state. So provide free spay and neutering, vaccinations, and free animal control training. So those are the two focuses of our program. Through that tax checkoff, like I said, we get most of our funding that way. Since we started collecting funds through the tax checkoff, we've actually collected over $2,388,000 on line 33F of the Massachusetts Resident Income Tax Form. 2020 was actually our highest donation year, which we weren't expecting. So we thought with the pandemic hitting, we were going to see a drop in donations. We saw the opposite. We actually had the taxpayers kind of rally around us, and we actually collected $362,000 in 2020. So we were very happy about that. In addition to that tax checkoff, we do have a couple other avenues of revenue coming in. We have gotten $350,000 in the last 3.5 years by a line item on the state budget. So the state of Massachusetts has really supported our efforts, and they've put an additional line item in the Department of Agricultural Resources budget to help offset more costs of spay and neutering more animals in Mass. So we've been really thankful for that. This year we weren't expecting to get any from that with the pandemic, but we got an additional $50,000 from the state this year. In addition to those two avenues, we have collected over $104,000 through grant programs and through online donations. So people can, if they have already filed their taxes, they can donate to us directly through an online portal. And while that's not our biggest source of revenue, we do get some money trickling in through that. A couple things that have just recently happened, and again, we weren't expecting this, we've started to get added into some of the fines in the Mass General laws. So in Massachusetts, Chapter 140 is really our animal control kind of hub where most of the animal control laws are. And as some of those laws have been revised over the years, we've started seeing that the Massachusetts Animal Fund gets mentioned that if fines are collected, the money goes into the Massachusetts Animal Fund instead of the general fund. So that's been a nice change. We haven't started seeing money from those because they're very recent, but we've been getting mentioned in more and more bills that are coming through the pipeline. So what have we done with that? Just to kind of really quickly kind of go over what we've done with the money collected. We started our voucher program in 2014. So the fund was created in 2012. The voucher program really launched in July of 2014. And since then, we've spent $1.8 million offsetting spay neuter costs across Massachusetts. So we have a voucher program, and eligible animals are able to apply for vouchers. And we have really three main categories of animals that are eligible. So our primary focus, especially during times like this, is to make sure that no cat or dog leaves a municipal shelter without the option of being spayed, neutered, and vaccinated. So those are our, when we get those requests in, they go out pretty much the same day. The next category is we want to offset the cost of spay and neuter for low-income residents in Massachusetts. So we offer free vouchers. People apply through their animal control officers, so they have to go through their ACO to get on our wait list. But then we issue vouchers to the owners for no cost spay, neuter, and vaccination. So that's by far our biggest category of animals we help. So 71% of all of our vouchers actually go to that category. But wait times can get extensive since we cover the whole state and we're really dependent on surgery capacity and available funding at any one time. We've actually seen wait times upward of 10 months in some area. And one particular area in Massachusetts has a wait time of close to a year right now, just because of the high need in that area and the low number of veterinary providers. But right now across most of the state, the average wait time is less than 2 months. So for owned animals. And then whenever we have free funding or surgery slots available, we do also try to help with TNR cases. So a lot of times we're utilized for that when there's cases of disease outbreak in an area. We'll work with the animal control officers and shelter rescues to help with those kind of situations. And then we also have kind of an emergency fund, which has merged into the voucher program in the last couple of years, but that's for cases of animal hoarding, for disease outbreak, like I mentioned, but also for those tiny emergencies for one animal that has PIO or dystocia. So those are considered emergency cases for us, and we issue vouchers right away. Just to really briefly, I know this is just a quick overview. You know, one of the things to mention, like I said, 2020 was our biggest collection year as far as tax donations. However, you know, our goal is always to have 50% of all revenue going into the fund, at least 50% go back out to spay neuter surgeries. In the last few years, we've been closer to 70% has gone to direct animal care costs. But last year, with surgery capacity down, we actually finished 2020 with only 41% of that money going directly for spay neuter surgeries. So we really had kind of a shutdown in Massachusetts where it really limited our surgery capacity for the first 6 months, but we have since really ramped up. And so we are expecting, we've rolled over that additional funding into our budget for 2021. And in 2021, right now, with our estimated donations that we are expecting to get in, which is around $360,000 on the tax checkoff, and the rollover, we're hoping to spend $330,000 this next year to spay, neuter, and vaccinate animals across Massachusetts. So we got a lot of money to really get out there, and our veterinary providers are really beginning to ramp up their efforts. So, you know, just to kind of go over, we run through animal control officers, but we contract private veterinary offices and high volume veterinary offices, and we reimburse them for their time. So once a voucher goes to an individual, they schedule their spay neuter with a veterinary provider in our program. The vouchers then return to us and we reimburse the vets for their time. And currently we have a 4-tier reimbursement rate. Lowest tier is $75 reimbursement for male cats, and it goes all the way up to $450 reimbursement for a large dog spay with complications. So, you know, we do try to make it really fair to the veterinary providers and make sure we're covering their costs, and we're reevaluating those rates this year to make sure we continue to meet their costs.
I'm with FOHO West Virginia, which is an all-volunteer group. We've been around since 1994. And this has just been a great introduction into what we're doing in West Virginia with our program. And I'll try and get into the nuts and bolts of it from what Helga had said, reinforcing all the points that she made about gathering data. Gathering data was just the most important thing that we could do over all of our period of time. And we have 55 counties in West Virginia, so it was complicated because there was really no central oversight on how we were going to do this or gather data, and there were just so many different approaches to animal control and how they kept their data together. So we had an emphasis certainly on preventing pet overpopulation and euthanasia of dogs and cats in shelters, but we found that the most important factor that we could start promoting was really the saving of tax dollars. So that really morphed over time into that and persuading legislators to our position. As we gathered data, an interesting piece that we found was that $218 was the average per animal sheltering cost in West Virginia shelters. This really emphasized for us with the program that we were able to make our points on, that we could save maybe nearly $10 million taxpayer dollars if we could control the pet overpopulation and the pets were going into shelters. So that began to resonate as we shifted our arguments from, oh, the animals were getting euthanized, which of course that was dear to our heart, but to the financial burden and the tax burden on the taxpayer and how we could relieve that. We knew about 11,000 dogs and cats needed to be altered yearly in West Virginia over a 10-year period to have a significant impact on pet overpopulation. We relied on several sources to calculate that, and Stacy's providing that information for you. in some of in the question area on all of those areas where we got our data, because you'll have to do that for your own state. And you do need to do that because legislators want to hear, they want to know what's happening in West Virginia, what's happening, where are the dollars, what's the whole, and you need to go in there prepared for that. So that's an important piece. So why the pet food fee? Well, all the other issues, all the other different bills that you've heard about and solutions for funding weren't available to us. We tried several of them. The license plate, we couldn't do that in West Virginia. It's not available to us as a funding source. So we looked at the pet food fee. We knew Maine was doing it. We did this, we started looking at that even before Maryland did theirs, because we started in 2010 on this, and then Maryland did theirs, and that even helped us with reinforcing it. But the money was already going into the West Virginia Department of Agriculture. Adding an additional fee to the already existing pet food fee to register brands of dog and cat food in West Virginia, wow. Who would have thought that there were like 10 to 12,000 different brands? I mean, it just was so amazing to us that it was a revelation. It was reliable, it was sustainable funding. This is the big one for us. 99.9% came from out of state, at least in West Virginia, because we don't have pet food manufacturers here. We have one in the state, and she's on our state committee, by the way. So, but having that 99.9%, you need to know your state. In West Virginia, we're heavy and wealthy in natural resources, but all that goes out of state and very little comes back to us. So it meant a lot to West Virginians when, oh, really? You mean all the money's going to come from out of state to West Virginia for once we get something back? That was the one that we hit on again and again, and it began to resonate. Now, did the legislators still argue a little bit, oh, it's a tax? We had to work on that, be ready for it, because that's what the pet food people will say. It was related to the issue of dogs and cats. The pet food industry also is a profitable industry. Based on the pet food's own revenue reports in 2018, their sales were $172 million in the state of West Virginia. We couldn't take off 900,000, seriously? In 2013, the pet food industry sales nationally were 21 billion, and now they're 36 billion today. Know those statistics when you go to your Senate and your House hearings. Know your data. We did studies. Helga was right on. Do all you can. We did a white paper for the West Virginia Department of Agriculture. We knew we had to get it by them since they controlled the Ag Committee, and both Ag committees in the House and the Senate. If they weren't supportive, this was going down, and we knew it. So we went to our opposition and got their support first. Even if they didn't wholeheartedly support it, we wanted them not to oppose us. Plus, they would be administering the program. We met with hunting groups because the pet food industry is very good about telling all of them that all their pet food's going to be really sky high, and they have 8 and 10 dogs. So we met with the hunting groups and told them this isn't going to happen, and here's why, and we had the data to show it. We met with the West Virginia Farm Bureau. It's huge in West Virginia. And also the pet food lobbyist worked for the Farm Bureau. He was their lobbyist. So we slipped in the back door, met with them. They loved us, put an article in their magazine, which I wish I could show you. I had this to show you. The article in the magazine says, and it came out the 3 months of the session, it came out and it really definitely moved some votes to our side. The aim of the article was spay neuter will save tax dollars in West Virginia. It was revelatory for us. And these legislators listened to the Farm Bureau. So we had them. So we were on a roll, we felt, on that. The spay neuter campaign that we endeavored to do, we thought, okay, we're going to get this done. We didn't start our spay neuter campaign. We'd always done a little bit over the years, but we did an intense campaign about 7 to 8 months before 2017 session. We did TV, digital, print. We targeted animal advocates, veterinarians, county commissioners, West Virginia legislators. We had a different message for different people. We did the public. We had cute commercials. It cost us about $14,000. It was well worth it. I thought that was we got some pretty good deals in the state with some stations to work that out. but you really need to get the message out to people. And people were seeing all kinds of cute commercials about just support spay neuter funding. Just tell your legislator, support the funding. Our legislative effort took about 7 years. We're a 501c3, so we can do obviously informational lobbying. But to get into the nitty gritty, we had West Virginia Voters for Animal Welfare, which is a group that can legislate for us. And they were the ones that did it. And we kept ourselves completely according to Hoyle there on what you should do. So make sure about that. 2013, this is just over our history. The legislators wanted to give us something. They never wanted to give us funding. So in 2013, they passed a bill that set up the fund. And then in 2015, we already had the fund, so we passed the rules. No funding still. So then in 2017, the funding bill finally passed with everything that we had done. We emphasized local control. Our state moved from blue to red in 2016. And it was huge to be locally controlled. So no top-down stuff. This was going to go out as grants to local communities. They would make their own decisions on how they administered that money, spay neuter wise, within the rules, within their counties. Our Facebook page was unbelievably helpful for us during the legislative session because you need to get information out quickly. Okay, the program itself. We only got $450,000 a year out of it, and we're very, very happy to have it. It was cut in half. Our $900,000 request was cut in half in a Senate hearing, and that happens. So you go with it. We thought, okay, we're going to just go with it, and we did. And we have a sunset clause, 2027. Helga's exactly right. You have to stay on top of this. You got to build this program and the support so that these legislators will be back to help you get this again when you want this extended. It's administered by the West Virginia Department of Ag. We have a state spay neuter committee that works on helping with getting the grants out there. FOHO West Virginia, my group, has 2 people on the committee. I'm on the committee. 1 pet food person is on the committee. We only have 1.7 some million people in the state, so we're not huge, but we've done 30,000 dogs and cats, including community cats, in 3 years. In 2020, this is huge for us, 52 of 55 counties were served. That keeps it relevant and popular to get it everywhere, because you want to be able to tell a legislator, here's what's happening in your county. So don't be just giving it to the big guys, and make sure everybody got something. If you're eligible in the state in 2021, we haven't given out the grant yet, but 67 groups are applying. Everyone will get something. And you can see those details at the West Virginia Department of Ag website. And that is also a link that you'll have available. We did matching funds too, which was interesting. Some of us were kind of against that in the beginning because we wanted to make sure everybody got something. But actually the matching funds did push people up in ranking a little more, so they got more of what they requested, but it also made the grant money go further. So actually it was a good idea. Okay, almost done here. The post-promotional activities, which I wish I could show you some of the things that we've done and our beautiful logo, but make sure you're on top of it. Helga couldn't have said anything more important than we did thank yous to legislators with beautiful, big, oversized postcards. It said, here's what's happening with the program. We did thank yous to veterinarians. We went to vet conferences. We did Ag Day at the Capitol. We're not done. It's not really the Department of Ag's job to promote the program. They just administer. They're made to administer it by the legislature. So you have to make sure you take that on and you have a good relationship with them to do it. And we have a West Virginia animal law book that we do in the state. It's beautiful and very well received. We've been doing it for 12 years. And we put it in the hands of law enforcement officers throughout the state, in a little handy pocket-sized one with all state law. And on the back, it promotes the spay neuter program in the state. Ending statement, one of our humane society in Pocahontas County, the head of that said, the state grant is a lottery win for organizations in rural areas where fundraising is limited. And thank you so much for your attention. I'm glad you probably in some ways it's probably good you didn't see me because I'm waving my hands and I move around when I talk. But anyway, so thank you so much for your attention on this topic. It's been a wonderful conference, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Teresa. So folks, if you have questions, put it in the questions box here. If there's any questions, I think everybody's just been enthralled watching this. So at this point in time, Sherry, since I know a lot about Massachusetts, in addition to the Mass Animal Fund, you also have, there's also the MAC license plate. So in terms of publicly funded programs, we actually sort of have two programs that work together. And the other part of the Mass Animal Fund, just to clarify for folks, is part of the funds go to training animal control officers, right? Oh, you know what? I muted you. My fault. I had the controls.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure out
It's fine.
myself. But yeah, I mean, we do work a lot with other organizations. We don't have a license plate in Massachusetts. That's a private organization that collects those funds. But you know, our goal with the Mass Animal Fund is just to kind of get to those animals that aren't able to be reached by the other programs. So a lot of our program is collaborating with those other organizations that have funds in different areas.
Right. So the Massachusetts Animal Coalition, they have a grant process which services quite a few shelters with the license plate funds. So they're sort of covering that shelter component where Mass Animal Fund is covering more the public. And the vouchers do have to be issued either by a spay neuter provider or the animal control officer.
Yeah, with the Mass Animal Fund, we do only have 2 full-time staff members. So to be able to do a voucher program that's statewide, we really utilize our animal control officers, which we have over 500 in Massachusetts, and our veterinary providers, which we're right around 30 right now with veterinary providers. So all voucher requests go through them and then get filtered into us. And we send them out and do all of the accounting side as well.
And you do voucher days to catch up.
Yes, so we do voucher days. Those are kind of, you know, the day where the provider can focus on just doing the Mass Animal Fund vouchers. And on those days, our staff does go out and assist any way we can. A lot of time it's invoicing. Since I used to be a vet tech, sometimes I'm, you know, helping with the animal side of it, helping with check-in, helping with discharge. So really, however they want to utilize us, we're there and willing.
Helga, if you had an organization or a state group that was interested in exploring this option, you know, if they wanted to sort of do a feasibility study on whether this would fly or not fly, you know, what are sort of the top 3 points you'd offer?
Find a way to work with the shelters in the state to get the numbers. We were lucky, since we had the Animal Sheltering Board, we sent the questionnaires to shelters through that. It may mean calling everybody, and the approach has to be one of, please help us so that we can try to get this money to help you. And rather than, oh, look at your numbers, they're so bad, now we're gonna go and send out a press release. Like, that doesn't help things. So find a way to work with the shelters. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can write projections in there saying, you know, 3 out of 50 shelters didn't respond. It doesn't mean you can't move forward. Note that, be honest about it. That would be another thing. Be honest in anything you write. When you speak to legislators, you have to, you know, speak to the facts. If you don't know an answer, don't make one up. Say, I will go find out. That will help your credibility so much. And I think take your time with the study. It's also not a 1-week job. Know that it's, you know, you're going to be in it for a while. If a couple people can do it together, it might be easier. I know Beth Frank, who's in the conference, has been working on it for her state, and it's a lot of work. So to the extent you can build a little committee and divvy up the tasks, that'll help you get it done and keep you from feeling overwhelmed and burned out, I think.
Excellent. Teresa, do you have any final comments that you'd like to add before we switch over to the other panel?
The only thing I would, can you hear me now?
Yes?
Am I okay? The only thing I would add is if you do it, I would do it, it's a little surreptitiously, a little bit in your state. It's like, don't be out there broadcasting everywhere. That's what you're doing, because all you do is give the pet food industry a heads up for them to prepare for it. Now, it doesn't mean that, you know, they didn't know we were coming a little bit in 2017, because we had been back, not every year, but we would go every other year or so. But I think they believed, because we had turned red, that the state had turned red, that we wouldn't go back then until we built some relationships with new legislators. But we decided to tackle it, and I'm so glad we did, because we caught them off guard. And we were well into the session with, you know, our commercials running and all of that without them knowing about it. And I had talked to the lobbyist, and it was almost comical, because he said he had to go home and tell his wife that he was beaten by several gray-haired ladies in his Senate hearing that day. And I'm not sure if I'm not sure exactly I'd take that as a compliment, but the point is, you need to be careful. They're very well organized, and they're becoming more well organized as more states take this on.
Excellent. Well,
They
thank you
certainly
so
have
much.
the money to do it. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this great panel and great information. Appreciate it, and appreciate everything that you're all doing.